Wind River Range, Wyoming Territory, November 1915. Snow falling thick as communion wafers outside the cabin windows, each flake catching firelight before dissolving into darkness. Inside, an old man sat by the hearth, hands trembling, not from cold, but from the weight of memory. Elijah Stone was 66 years old, hair white as the mountains he'd lived among for 47 years, face carved deep with lines that told stories his mouth had rarely spoken. Across from him sat his grandson Thomas, 23, and restless in the new army uniform that still smelled of wool and starch. The boy looked like his grandmother, same red hair, same green eyes that asked questions even when the mouth stayed silent. Same way of tilting the head when listening like the whole world might speak if you just paid attention. On the table between them lay a leather journal, worn soft as prayer beads, the cover stained with what might have been tears or mountain water or both. Catherine's handwriting filled every page. 39 years of days written in ink that had faded from black to brown to something closer to sunset. Thomas broke the silence first. Young men always did. Grandpa, when did you know you loved Grandma enough to fight the whole world? Elijah looked up from the fire. His eyes still sharp despite the years, still the color of creek stones found his grandson's face. The boy was shipping out to France next week. The Great War, they called it, though Elijah couldn't see anything great about young men dying in mud thousands of miles from home. Thomas had confessed earlier, voice shaking, that he planned to marry a Catholic girl named Marie, a French girl. His family, good Protestants, all had forbidden it. The old man's fingers, gnarled from frostbite and hard use, touched the journal. The leather was cool smooth, like touching the past itself. Your grandmother wrote in this every night for 39 years, he said. Stopped only when the consumption took her last spring. Thomas leaned forward, firelight catching the buttons on his uniform. She was Catholic too, Elijah continued. A nun, actually, for 10 years. The boy's eyes went wide. Grandma Kate was a nun. Elijah nodded once slow. Let me tell you how a virgin mountain man married a former nun twice his size and survived the judgment of an entire territory. He opened the journal. The first page, dated August 1876, showed handwriting that shook like aspen leaves. The words were simple, brutal in their honesty. I arrived in hell today. They call it Redemption Creek. I call it the place where hope goes to die. But you need to understand where it started, Elijah said. Not the day she arrived, the day she almost left. His voice dropped lower, finding the rhythm of story, the cadence of confession. August 20th, 1876, 3 weeks after we married, 21 nights after I last touched her. The fire popped. Snow whispered against the windows, and Elijah Stone, who had spent most of his life in silence, began to speak. The cabin bedroom was too small for Catherine Brennan. It had been too small for 3 weeks, but tonight the walls pressed closer, the ceiling lower, the narrow bed more coffin than comfort. She sat on the edge of the mattress, packing her canvas bag by lamplight. Each item a small defeat. 2 dresses, both brown calico, both let out at every seam until there was no more fabric to give. Her fingers had done the work at Holy Name's convent, stitching by candlelight after the other sisters slept. Even then, even in those silent years, some part of her had known she would need clothes for a body that refused to be small. 1 Bible Latin edition. The leather cover was cracked from years of hands, her hands and the hands of women before her, all of them seeking answers in words they half understood. She ran her thumb over the golden cross embossed on the front. It caught the lamplight through tiny reflections across the rough log walls. 1 rosary, wooden beads worn smooth, hidden in the bottom of the bag, where it couldn't judge her. Mother Superior Agatha had given it to her the day she took her vows at 18. You will need this child when the devil comes calling. The devil had come all right, came in the form of wanting, in the form of hunger for things prayer couldn't fill. 1 pair of boots, leather cracked and sole worn thin. They would carry her to the train station at dawn. Away from this cabin, this silence, this man who had married her but wouldn't touch her. Through the window she could see him. Elijah Stone, 27 years old, built narrow as a fence post, chopping wood in the darkness like a man possessed. The axe rose and fell, each impact echoing across the clearing. He'd been at it for 2 hours. The woodpile was already higher than the cabin roof. A man didn't chop wood at midnight unless he couldn't sleep. Couldn't sleep because something gnawed at him from the inside. Catherine knew that feeling, had felt it for 10 years in the convent, lying on her narrow cot while the other sisters breathed peaceful sleep around her, while her body burned with wanting things her vows forbade. While every prayer felt like swallowing stones, she'd left the convent for this, left safety, left certainty, left the only home she'd known since her parents died. Answered an advertisement in the Denver Post written in careful script. Homesteader seeking wife. Hard work, simple life. Wind River country. Must be strong, faithful, willing. She was strong, God knew. 6 feet 2 inches of muscle and bone shoulders, broad enough to carry a grown man hands that could wring a chicken's neck or lift a full water barrel without strain. The convent had put that strength to use. Scrubbing floors, hauling laundry, digging garden beds, while the smaller, prettier sisters taught children or arranged flowers for the altar. She was faithful too in her poem. 10 years of rising at 4 for lauds, kneeling on stone floors until her knees bled, eating thin soup and hard bread, speaking only when spoken to. 10 years of trying to make herself small, enough for God to love. But the willing part, that's where she'd failed. Mother Superior Agatha had known, had seen the restlessness in Catherine's eyes during Vespers, the way her gaze drifted to the windows, to the mountains beyond Denver's streets, to anywhere but the crucifix on the altar. The old woman had tried to beat it out of her. 47 times over 10 years the rod had fallen on Catherine's back. Once for asking why they couldn't question doctrine, once for humming a song from her childhood, once for looking too long at a workman repairing the convent gate. The scars were still there, pale lines crisscrossing her back like a map of failed obedience. She'd left anyway. Walked out of Holy Names Convent on a Tuesday morning, returned the habit to Mother Superior's trembling hands, and spoken the words she'd been rehearsing for a year. I choose life. Mother Agatha had slapped her. The sound had echoed in the stone chapel like a gunshot. You choose damnation, the old woman had hissed. You choose flesh over spirit. You will regret this until you draw your last breath. Maybe she would. Maybe this was regret, packing a bag in a strange cabin while her husband chopped wood to avoid being near her. She closed the bag, stood. Her head nearly touched the ceiling beams. Elijah had built this cabin for a normal-sized woman, or maybe built it for solitude, never expecting someone like her to fill the space. Outside, the axe fell silent. Catherine held her breath, listening. Footsteps, heavy breathing. The creak of the lean-to-shed door opening, closing. He was going to sleep out there again, like he had every night for 3 weeks. Giving her space, he'd said, letting her settle in. But 3 weeks wasn't settling in. 3 weeks was abandonment. She grabbed the lamp, left the bag on the bed, and walked out into the night. The shed smelled like blood and leather musk and wood smoke. Furs hung from the rafters, beaver and fox and mart, their eyes empty, their bodies flattened to valuable pelts. Steel traps lined one wall, jaws gaping, waiting for something living to stumble in. A workbench dominated the center, scarred from years of skinning knives and mistakes. Elijah sat on a 3-legged stool, head bowed, sharpening his Bowie knife. 12 inches of steel edge, honed so fine it could split a hair. The whetstone sang against the blade, a rhythm older than speech. Shh, shh, shh. He didn't look up when Catherine ducked through the doorway. Didn't stop sharpening. But his shoulders tense, muscles going tight under the thin cotton shirt. You should be asleep, he said. Voice quiet, always quiet, like he'd forgotten how to speak at normal volume after 8 years alone in the mountains. Catherine set the lamp on the workbench. The light caught the furs, made their dead eyes gleam. She had to stoop to keep her head from hitting the beams. Even stooped, she dominated the small space. So should you. Can't sleep. The knife, the stone, the rhythm continued. Been trying for 3 weeks. She stepped closer. He didn't retreat, but the knife paused mid-stroke. Why won't you touch me? The question hung in the air like smoke. Catherine watched his face, watched the way his jaw clenched, the way his knuckles went white on the knife handle. Elijah Stone was not handsome, not by any measure. His face was too narrow, nose broken from some long-ago accident, beard thick enough to hide most of his features. But his eyes, when he finally looked up, were honest, creek stone gray with flecks of gold that caught lamplight. Those eyes held something close to pain. Because I don't know how, he said. The words came out broken, like each one cost blood. Catherine blinked. What I don't know how. His voice cracked. I've never been with a woman, never even kissed a woman before our wedding day. The knife clattered to the workbench. His hands started shaking, fine tremors running up his arms like fever chills. Catherine stared at him, processing. A virgin. 27 years old and still a virgin. Tell me, she said softly. And it came pouring out. 8 years of silence breaking like a dam. Parents died when I was 19. Winter of 1868. Avalanche took them both while we were checking trap lines. My sister Sarah, she was 14. We survived 6 weeks eating horse meat and snow. She died of pneumonia the day before rescue came. His voice stayed flat, telling it like a weather report, but his hands wouldn't stop shaking. After that, it was just me, alone in these mountains. I'd go into town maybe twice a year, sell furs, buy supplies. But I didn't know how to talk to people anymore, especially not women. They'd look at me like I was something wild, something dangerous, so I stopped trying. He looked up at Catherine and his eyes were wet. 8 months ago, I turned 27, realized I'd been alone longer than I'd been around people, realized I might die out here without ever knowing what it meant to not be alone. So I put an advertisement in the paper. Figured maybe some woman desperate enough to answer would be patient with a fool like me. Catherine's throat went tight. Then you stepped off that train, Elijah continued, tall and strong and beautiful, and I froze. Every night since I lie in this shed thinking, what if I touch you wrong? What if I hurt you? What if you realize you married a man who doesn't know the first damn thing about loving a woman? The confession ended. The silence that followed felt heavier than stone. Catherine knelt down, bringing herself to his eye level. Her knees cracked on the hard dirt floor. You think I'm beautiful, Elijah laughed, wet and broken. God, yes. Every morning I watch you hang washing. The way you move strong and sure. How you hum Gregorian chants while cooking. The way sunset catches your red hair. You're the most beautiful thing I've seen in 8 years of seeing only mountains and sky. Then why didn't you ask me to teach you? Because you were a nun. He said it like an accusation and an apology at once. You took vows of purity. I thought you'd be disgusted by me wanting you that way. Catherine felt something crack open in her chest. Laughter or tears or both. Elijah. Her voice came out rough. I left the convent for this. For wanting. Now it was his turn to stare. She settled back on her heels, hands folded in her lap like prayer, but not prayer at all. My family sent me to holy names when I was 18. Said I was too big, too strange. No man would want me. Better to give me to God. So I took vows. Promised obedience, poverty, chastity. She closed her eyes, remembering. 10 years of cold floors and thin soup and prayers that bounced off stone walls. But the wanting never stopped. I'd lie awake at night aching for things I couldn't name. Touch, warmth, life. Mother Superior caught me once pressing my hand between my legs under the blanket. She beat me. Said the devil lived in my flesh. Catherine opened her eyes, found Elijah watching her with something close to horror. She beat me 47 times over 10 years. For asking questions, for being too tall, for wanting. These scars on my back, she gestured behind her. Those are from trying to make me small enough for God to love. Her voice hardened. But I'm not small. I never was. And 6 months ago, I realized God didn't want me small either. He made me this size for a reason, made me strong for a reason. So I left, walked away from safety because I wanted to tremble, wanted to know what it feels like to be wanted as a woman, not just as a servant scrubbing floors. She reached out, took his shaking hands in hers. Her hands were twice the size, calloused from work, but gentle. I don't need you to know how, Elijah. I need you to want to learn. Do you want me not as a wife to cook and clean? As a woman, Elijah's breath caught. His fingers tightened on hers. So desperately it keeps me awake every night. Catherine smiled. First real smile in 3 weeks. Then we'll learn together. I'll show you where I end, and you find everything in between. They walked back to the cabin in silence. Not the heavy silence of the past 3 weeks, but something else. Something charged with possibility and fear in equal measure. The night was cold August in the high country, the kind of cold that promised early snow. Stars scattered overhead like thrown salt, more stars than Catherine had ever seen from Denver streets. The Milky Way cut across the sky, a river of light flowing between peaks. Elijah's hand found hers in the darkness. His fingers were rough scarred from trap springs and knife slips and frostbite, but they held on with surprising strength. Catherine's hands swallowed his completely, but he didn't let go. They walked 200 paces from the shed to the cabin. Each step felt like crossing a border between countries. Behind them, loneliness and fear. Ahead, the unknown. The cabin door creaked open. Lamplight spilled across the threshold. Elijah went in first, lit the oil lamp on the bedside table. The flame caught, grew through golden light across the small room. Catherine stood in the doorway, suddenly afraid. The bed looked impossibly small, the ceiling too low. Everything built for regular people, and she was anything but regular. "What are you thinking?" Elijah's voice came soft from beside the bed. "That I don't know how to be small." His hands went to the buttons of his shirt, started undoing them, fingers fumbling. "Then don't be." The shirt came off. Catherine saw scars. A grizzly had carved 8 inches of furrow across his ribs, the scar tissue raised and rough, the mark of claws trying to gut him. Elijah touched it absently, like checking it was still there. 1872. She came at me while I was checking traps. Had cubs nearby. I got my knife into her throat before she opened me up all the way. His voice was matter-of-fact, telling it like a recipe. Catherine stepped closer into the lamplight. Her eyes traced the scar, then found others. 3 fingers on his left hand were shortened, the ends blunt and scarred. Frostbite damage, old and permanent. Winter after my parents died. Had to dig through snow with bare hands looking for firewood. Fingers died slow. Cut them off myself before gangrene could spread. A circular scar on his right shoulder, puckered and deep. Shoshone arrow, 1874. Land dispute. Wasn't his fault. I was on his hunting grounds. Dozens of smaller marks scattered across his torso. Knife slips, rope burns, thorn scratches, branch whips. The accumulated damage of 8 years surviving alone. Elijah stood there, shirtless, scars on display, and looked at her with something close to shame. "I'm built for surviving, not for loving." Catherine reached up, started unlacing her dress, the brown calico that had been let out 3 times and still strained across her shoulders. "Show me your scars," she'd said. Now it was her turn. The dress fell, the undershirt followed. She stood before him in her final layer, then removed that too. Elijah's breath stopped. Her body was not soft, not curved in the ways paintings showed women should be. She was all muscle and bone, shoulders broad as a man's arms, thick from hauling water and scrubbing floors and digging garden beds. Her breasts were large but firm, her stomach flat and ridged with muscle, her thighs powerful enough to crush. "Lord have mercy," Elijah's voice came out strangled. "Kate, you're like one of those Greek statues, like strength carved from marble." Then she turned her back. The scars from Mother Superior's rod crisscrossed her skin in a web of faded white lines. 47 scars. 47 times someone had tried to beat the life out of her. "They tried to make me ashamed of wanting," she said. It never worked. She turned back around, facing him fully, naked and unashamed. "This is who I am, Elijah. Scarred, big, too much for most men. Can you want this?" He stepped forward, reached out with those scarred, frostbitten hands, touched her shoulder with something close to reverence. Every single inch, he whispered. She sat on the edge of the bed first. The frame creaked under her weight but held. At this height, they were finally eye to eye. Face to face, equal. "Teach me," Elijah said. His voice had gone rough with want and fear mixed together. He stood between her knees, close enough that she could feel the heat coming off his skin. Catherine took his right hand in both of hers, studied it. The calluses, the scars, the shortened fingers. A hand that had killed and skinned and survived. She guided it to her neck. "Here." Slow, like you're memorizing it. His fingers traced the line of her throat, tentative at first, then more confident, finding the pulse that hammered there, following it down to her collarbone. Catherine shuddered. Elijah felt it. His eyes went wide with something like wonder. Yes, he did it again, slower this time, deliberately making her tremble. His fingers learned the hollow at the base of her throat, the ridge of her collarbone, the curve where her neck met her shoulder. Each touch drew a reaction. A soah, a gasp, a full body shiver she couldn't control. You're so responsive, he murmured. Every touch makes you shake, because nobody ever cared enough to notice. The words came out before she could stop them, true and raw and painful. Elijah's eyes glistened in the lamplight. Then I'll spend tonight proving them all wrong. His hands moved lower, cupped her breasts, learning their weight. When his thumb brushed across her nipple, Catherine gasped and arched into his touch. There he breathed. There. Yes, God, Elijah, yes. He filed it away like treasure, kept exploring. Behind her ear made her whimper. The inside of her wrist made her breath catch. The curve where neck met shoulder made her moan his name out loud. Show me more. His voice had gone hoarse. Show me everything. I want to know every spot that makes you tremble. She guided his hands lower, across her ribs counting them, down her belly feeling the muscles contract, to her thighs showing him the sensitive skin on the inside. When his fingers found the spot high on her inner thigh, her whole body jerked. That's a good spot, he said, the barest hint of a smile. Yes. She was laughing and crying at once. That's a very good spot. He kissed her there, soft and reverent. She trembled so hard the bed frame creaked. I got you, he murmured against her skin. I got you, Kate. You're safe with me. His hands moved higher, following her whispered instructions, learning the geography of pleasure, the map of her body that no one else had bothered to read. She showed him the rhythm, the pressure, the exact place that made stars burst behind her eyelids. Like this. His voice shook with concentration and desire. Like this, yes, just like, oh God, just like that. The pleasure built slow at first, then faster, rising like floodwater, unstoppable and overwhelming. His fingers moved with growing confidence, reading her body's responses, adjusting based on every gasp and moan. When she finally shattered, it wasn't like the lonely releases she'd given herself in desperate privacy at the convent. This was connection, being known, being wanted, being cherished. She cried out his name as waves rolled through her hands, tangling in his hair, powerful thighs trembling around his hand. When the tremors subsided, she pulled him up to her, kissed him, fierce, tasting salt, and something else, something that might have been joy. Did I do it right? He asked against her mouth. Vulnerable as a child. You did it perfect. She pulled him closer, wrapping her arms around his narrow frame. But we're not done, not nearly done. His eyes went wide. There's more, so much more. She reached for the buttons of his trousers with shaking fingers. Now it's my turn to learn you. Elijah sucked in a breath as Catherine's hands worked the buttons. Her fingers, large and capable, fumbled with the same nervous energy that had made his hands shake minutes before. I don't want to hurt you, she whispered. You won't. He covered her hands with his, steadying them. Kate, I trust you, more than I've ever trusted anyone. The trousers fell, then the union suit beneath. He stood naked before her, trying not to cover himself, trying not to show the shame of a body that felt inadequate next to hers. But the way she looked at him drove the shame away. Her eyes traveled over him like he was something precious, something worth studying. Can I touch you, please? Her hands explored like his had explored her, tentative then bolder, tracing the muscles of his chest lean and hard from years of physical work, the ridges of his ribs, the scars that marked him. When her fingers wrapped around him, he gasped. His knees nearly buckled, like this wonder in her voice. Yes. God, yes. She learned him with the same focus he'd shown her, listening to every hitch in his breath, every groan, every whispered instruction. I want you inside me, she whispered against his ear. The words sent fire through his blood. He nodded, unable to form words. She lay back on the bed, powerful and beautiful, trusting him with something no one else had touched with kindness. Elijah climbed over her, his smaller frame cradled between her thighs. The rightness of it hit him like lightning. This was where he belonged. This woman, this strong, magnificent woman, was his home. I don't know what I'm doing, he admitted, positioned at her entrance, shaking so hard he could barely hold himself steady. Neither do I, she cupped his face in her palms. So we'll figure it out together. Just go slow. Listen to me. I'll tell you what I need. He pushed forward slowly. The heat of her body enveloped him inch by trembling inch. She gasped, not in pain, but in something that sounded like relief. Okay, he managed. More than okay. Her hands gripped his shoulders. Keep going. Don't stop. He sank deeper until fully seated inside her. The sensation was so overwhelming, he had to close his eyes and breathe through it. He'd never felt less alone in his entire life. Now what? Now you move. Her legs wrapped around his waist to strengthen them, sending a thrill through him. Slow at first. Find a rhythm. Listen to what my body tells you. He started moving, clumsy at first, unsure of angle or pace. But Catherine's hands guided his hips. Her voice coached him through it. Gradually, he found something that made her gasp and arch beneath him. There she breathed. Right there. Like that. He focused on that angle, that rhythm. Her body tightened around him. He felt her getting close to that edge again. Touch me, she gasped. Like before, while you're inside me. His hand slipped between their bodies, found that spot she'd shown him. The combination made her cry out so loud the horses in the lean-to probably heard. Elijah, oh God. She shattered around him, her body clenching and pulsing. Her powerful legs holding him so tight he couldn't have pulled away even if he'd wanted to. And he didn't want to. The sensation of her climax triggered his own. Release like nothing he'd ever felt. Not just physical, but something deeper. Connection. Belonging. The absolute certainty that he was exactly where he was meant to be. Kate, I love you. The words tore out of him as he spilled inside her. I love you, I love you, I love you. Show me, she gasped, pulling him deeper. Keep showing me. When it was over, he collapsed on top of her, his slight weight barely registering on her powerful frame. Their hearts hammered against each other, his bird fast, hers deep and strong like a drum. Was that? He couldn't finish the question. That was everything. She stroked his sweat-damp hair. That was exactly right. They lay tangled in lamplight, neither willing to break the connection yet. Outside, the Wyoming wind howled across the high country, rattling windows. But inside their marriage bed, everything was warm and safe and right. I almost left Catherine confessed to the darkness above them. I had my bag packed, was going to take the dawn stage and pretend this never happened. Elijah's arms tightened around her waist as far as they could reach. What changed your mind? You did. She kissed the top of his head. You were honest. Didn't pretend to be something you weren't. Just told me the truth even though it was hard. I was terrified you'd laugh. I could never laugh at a man brave enough to admit what he doesn't know. She tilted his face up. Most men would have fumbled through it and blamed me when it went wrong. Made me feel like it was my fault for being too big. But you asked me to teach you. Made it about learning me, not proving yourself. Elijah felt tears burn. You make it sound noble. I was just scared and desperate. Sometimes that's the same thing as brave. She kissed him softly. And you're a very quick learner. He laughed against her lips, surprised. I got motivated, I noticed. She pulled the quilt over them both, cocooning them in warmth. What happens now? Traced lazy patterns on her skin. Now I spend the next 50 years learning new ways to make you tremble. That sound acceptable? More than acceptable. They drifted in comfortable silence, breathing synchronizing. Elijah felt himself starting to doze, safe and sated in a way he'd never experienced. But then Catherine spoke again, voice small. The town's going to keep talking, keep judging us. It's not going to stop just because we figured out how to love each other. Elijah pushed himself up on one elbow to look at her properly. Let them talk. Let them whisper and stare and make all the jokes they want. I don't care, Kate. You're my wife. You're the woman I love. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly. You say that now, I'll say it to their faces. His voice hardened. In fact, we should go to church Sunday. Let everyone see exactly what kind of marriage we have. Catherine's eyes went wide. Elijah, you don't have to. Yes, I do. He cupped her face in his hands. You came all this way, left everything you knew, married a stranger who was too scared to touch you for 3 weeks. The least I can do is stand up in front of this whole town and claim you properly. Let them know Catherine Stone is my wife, and I'm proud of that fact. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. No one's ever stood up for me before. Not once in 28 years. Then it's about damn time someone did. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. Starting with your husband, she pulled him back down. They made love again, slower this time. More confident, less fear. Elijah discovered 3 new spots that made her gasp. Behind her knee, the curve of her hip, the small of her back where her spine dipped. He filed them all away like treasure. November 1915. The fire had burned down to coals. Thomas sat silent processing. Outside, snow continued falling, burying the world in white. Elijah closed the journal. His hands spotted with age trembled slightly. That was the first night. That was the first night. We learned each other, made promises we kept for 39 years. Thomas looked down at his own hands, smooth, unscarred, young. In the town, Elijah's mouth twitched, something between smile and grimace. The town tried to destroy us, took everything we had, nearly killed your grandmother twice. He opened the journal to another page. Catherine's handwriting shakier, now dated September 1876. They want to take our land. They want to split us apart. But Elijah swore we'd stay together until last breath. I believe him. What happened? Thomas leaned forward. Elijah looked into the dying fire. We fought, we bled, we survived. He met his grandson's eyes. Just like you're going to have to fight for your Marie. The world doesn't make it easy, boy. Love worth having never is. Thomas nodded slowly, understanding settling into his bones. Tell me the rest, Grandpa. I need to know how you survived. Elijah fed another log to the fire. Watch the flames catch and grow. Then listen close, because the hard part was just beginning. The fire crackled. Thomas waited, hands folded, the army uniform suddenly feeling too tight across his shoulders. Elijah stared into the flames like they held answers to questions nobody had asked yet. Your grandmother used to say the first night was easy. He spoke slow, measuring each word. The hard part came the next morning when we had to face what we'd done. Face what it meant to love each other in a world that didn't want us to. August 21st, 1876. Dawn came cold and clear. Catherine woke in Elijah's arms for the first time. Her body ached in new ways, good ways that reminded her she was alive. He slept still, face buried in her hair, breathing steady and deep. She didn't want to move. For the first time in 28 years, she felt safe. But the world doesn't let you stay safe. Elijah's voice dropped lower. Thomas leaned in to hear. There was a knock at the door, loud, angry, the kind of knock that says, "Troubles come calling." Catherine sat up carefully, trying not to wake Elijah. Her muscles protested, reminding her of the night before in ways that made her blush even alone. She pulled on her dress, fingers clumsy with the laces, and padded barefoot to the main room. The knocking came again. Harder. 3 sharp blows that rattled the doorframe. She glanced back at the bedroom. Elijah stirred, reached for where she'd been found, empty space, his eyes opened. Someone's here, she whispered. He moved fast, rolled out of bed, pulled on trousers, grabbed the Sharps rifle from its pegs on the wall. The weapon was longer than Catherine was, tall, heavy as sin, the kind of gun that could drop a buffalo at 300 yards. Nobody comes here, he said, voice flat. Ever. He checked the rifle. Already loaded, always loaded. 8 years alone in the mountains had taught him to be ready. Catherine watched him move. This was different from last night's fumbling tenderness. This was the mountain man, the survivor, the man who'd killed a grizzly with a knife. The knocking stopped. A voice called out instead, loud, confident, used to being obeyed. Stone, open up, official business. Elijah's jaw clenched. He moved to the door, rifle held low but ready, cracked it open just enough to see out. 2 men stood in the clearing. Morning sun behind them, faces in shadow. The first was fat, not farmer fat or aging fat, but the kind of fat that came from easy living and rich food. He wore a black suit despite the mountain-cold vest straining across his belly, gold watch chain glinting. His face was pale and dour, pale with jowls that shook when he talked. Wade Hutchins, land speculator, out of lander. Elijah's voice telling the story carried something close to hatred. Man who made his money buying land cheap and selling dear. Didn't matter who got hurt in between. The second man was tall, thin, wore a badge pinned to his shirt and a Colt 45 on his hip. Deputy Frank Garrett, good man in a bad position. Did what the law said even when the law was wrong. Morningstone Wade called out, cheerful as church on Sunday. Heard you got yourself a wife. Congratulations. His eyes found Catherine through the gap in the door, traveled up and down her height, lingered too long. My, the runaway nun, whole territories talking about you two. Elijah stepped into the doorway, blocking Wade's view. What do you want, Hutchins? Wade pulled papers from his coat pocket, unfolded them with the careful precision of a man who knew exactly what weapons he carried. This, your homestead claim, filed in 1864, correct? You know it is. Well, there's a problem. Wade smiled. Teeth too white, too perfect. A big problem. He held up the papers. Legal documents stamped and official looking. Your father filed this claim under the Homestead Act, required 5 years continuous habitation to gain full ownership. But he died in 1868, 4 years after filing. Never completed the requirement. Elijah's knuckles went white on the rifle stock. Wade continued enjoying himself now. You've been living here, true, but you never filed a claim in your own name. Far as the law is concerned, this land is public domain. Available for claim. He tucked the papers back into his coat. I filed a new claim last month. Legal and proper. This land is mine now. You're squatting on my property. Catherine stepped forward, moving beside Elijah. She had to duck under the doorframe. That's not possible. This is his home. His father's grave is 100 yards from here. Wade's eyes crawled over her again. Law doesn't care about graves, sister. Law cares about paperwork. Deputy Garrett spoke up, voice apologetic but firm. I checked with the land office in Cheyenne Stone. It's legal. Your father never completed the 5-year requirement. The claim's void. Elijah lifted the rifle, not pointing it, not yet. But the message was clear. This is my land. My father died clearing it. Then he should have finished the paperwork. Wade's smile never wavered. Law's the law. You got until October 1st to either pay me $1,200 for the land or vacate. $1,200. Catherine felt the number like a punch. That was 6 times what the land was worth. Maybe more. That's theft, she said. That's business. Wade turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Stonehole Town knows you married a whore nun. Good luck getting any Christian to loan you money. He climbed onto his horse. Deputy Garrett followed, looking uncomfortable but saying nothing. October 1st, Wade called back. Cash or clear out. They rode away, dust rising behind their horses. Elijah stood frozen in the doorway. The rifle shook in his hands. Not from fear, from rage so pure it had nowhere to go. He spun, slammed the rifle into the wall. The stock cracked. He didn't seem to notice. Fuck, Catherine had never heard him curse. The word hung in the air like gun smoke. How much do you have? She asked quietly. 300, maybe. In furs from last winter. He turned to her, eyes red. That's 900 short, Kate. 900 we don't have and can't get in 5 weeks. Then we work. We trap every day. We sell everything. Even if we trap dawn to dusk, we can't make 900 in 5 weeks. His voice broke. The best season I ever had was 400 over 3 months. Catherine moved to him, put her hands on his face, making him look at her. Then we fight. We go to the land office. We appeal against a man with money and lawyers. He pulled away. We'll lose. Maybe. But we try. Because this is our home. The word home hit him visibly. He'd never called it that before. Not once in 8 years. Now it was home. And they were about to lose it. They rode into Lander that afternoon. Catherine sat behind Elijah on the old mule, arms wrapped around his waist. Every person they passed stopped to stare. The general store owner, a man named Carson, stood in his doorway watching them go by. Shook his head slowly, disapproval clear as day. The blacksmith, Big Jim Murphy, huge Irishman, with arms thick as fence posts, spit tobacco juice as they passed, looked at Catherine like she'd personally offended him. Women whispered behind gloved hands, pointed, pulled their children away like sin was catching. Catherine felt each stare like a brand, but she kept her head up. Chin high. She'd survived 10 years of judgment in the convent. She could survive this. The lands office sat at the end of Main Street. Small building, rough timber, official seal painted on the door. Inside, a young clerk named Timothy Brooks looked up from his ledger. Help you, Elijah laid Wade's papers on the desk. Need to contest this claim. Timothy studied the documents, pushed his spectacles up, read carefully. Finally, he sighed. Mr. Stone, I'm afraid Mr. Hutchins is correct. Your father's claim was never completed, and you never filed independently. The land is legally available for homesteading. There has to be something we can do. You could file a counterclaim. Challenge his ownership. Timothy didn't sound hopeful. but it takes 6 months to process and you'd need a lawyer. $200 minimum just to file. Catherine spoke up. What if we pay him the $1,200 he's asking? Timothy shrugged. That's between you and him. If you pay, he has to transfer the deed. But he sets the price. They left the office, stood on the wooden sidewalk. The town moved around them, people going about their lives while Catherine and Elijah's fell apart. A group of young men lounged outside the saloon, 5 of them, ages 18 to 22, the kind of boys who had nothing to do but make trouble. The leader was tall, blonde, red-faced. Billy Hutchins, Wade's son. Well. Billy pushed off the wall, grinning. If it ain't the hermit and his nun bride. His friends laughed, elbowed each other. Tell me, sister. Billy stepped closer. You still pray before bed, or just spread your legs for the mountain man? More laughter, louder now, drawing attention from passers-by. Catherine felt Elijah tense beside her, felt him start to reach for the knife at his belt. She stepped forward instead, put herself between Elijah and Billy. The boy was 6 feet tall. Catherine was taller. She looked down at him, face calm, saying nothing. Billy's grin faltered. He took a step back without meaning to. What? Got nothing to say, whore. I spent 10 years in silence, Catherine said, voice cold as mountain water. Learn to speak without words. Right now, my silence is telling you to walk away before my husband makes you. Billy glanced past her at Elijah, saw the Bowie knife in his hand, 12 inches of steel edge gleaming. The mountain man held it casual, like it was part of his arm. Billy swallowed hard. Your daddy's taking your land anyway. He tried to sound tough, but his voice shook. Enjoy your last month, sister. He and his friends walked away, trying to swagger, but walking too fast. Catherine turned to Elijah, found him staring at her. You were brave, he said. I was terrified, but I won't let them see me broken. They started back toward the mule. A voice stopped them. Mrs. Stone. An old woman stood in the doorway of the church. 70 at least, white hair pulled back, severe black dress buttoned to her chin. But her eyes were kind. Abigail Mercer, Elijah's voice in the present telling the story. Widow. Lived in Lander 40 years. Lost her husband to pneumonia in 73. People respected her because she'd survived when survival wasn't guaranteed. Abigail stepped closer, studied Catherine with those kind, sharp eyes. I knew Mother Agatha at Holy Names. She wrote me about you. Catherine braced for judgment. She said you were the strongest novice they ever had. Too much fire for those walls. Abigail smiled. I'm glad you got out. Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you. Abigail's smile faded. Be careful of Wade Hutchins. He's been eyeing Wind River land for months. Why, Elijah asked. Because the railroad's coming through next year. Abigail lowered her voice. My late husband was a surveyor. I still have his maps. The planned route goes right through your property. Wade knows it. That land will be worth $5,000 when the tracks arrive. The truth hit like a fist. This wasn't about homestead law. This was about greed. Wade wanted the land to sell to the railroad at massive profit. What can we do? Catherine asked. Fight. Abigail reached into her handbag, pulled out an envelope. This is $150, a loan interest-free. Pay me back when you can. Elijah started to refuse. We can't take your money. My husband was Irish Catholic. Abigail's voice hardened. This town treated us like dirt for 30 years because he married a Mexican woman. We survived because a few good people helped when no one else would. Now I help others. She pressed the envelope into Catherine's hands. But $150 won't buy the land back. You still need over $1,000 more. They rode home in silence, the weight of impossibility heavy as mountains. That night, they sat at the rough plank table counting money by lamplight. Furs from last winter, $300 worth. Elijah spread them out. Beaver, fox, marten, good pelts properly cured, but not enough. Abigail's loan, $150. Catherine added it to the pile. Total, $450. Needed, $1,200. Short, $750. 5 weeks to make $750. Impossible. Even the best trapping season couldn't produce that much in such a short time. Elijah stared at his hand-drawn map. Leather marked with years of knowledge. He traced the mountains with one scarred finger. There's one place I haven't trapped, where his finger stopped on the highest peak marked on the map. High Valley. North face of Thunder Peak. Why haven't you trapped there long? Silence. Outside, coyotes called to each other across the darkness. My father died there. Elijah's voice went flat. Avalanche, winter of '68. We were checking trap lines together. I heard the rumble ran. He didn't run fast enough. He looked up at Catherine, eyes haunted. I dug for 6 hours, found him under 12 feet of snow, brought his body back, buried him next to the cabin. Another pause. Swore I'd never go back. Catherine reached across the table, took his hand. But that valley, is it good for trapping best in the territory? Untouched for 8 years. Beaver, marten, fox. Hundreds of them, probably. He met her eyes. Could get 800 to 1,000 in furs if we work 3 weeks straight. His jaw clenched. But it's dangerous. Avalanche risk. Grizzlies, early snow, and you've never trapped a day in your life. Then teach me, like you taught me last night. She said it gentle but firm. Elijah looked at her. This tall, strong former nun who'd given up safety for love, who'd stood up to Billy Hutchins without flinching, who'd survived 10 years of beatings rather than become small. We leave in 3 days, he said. Up there 3 weeks. Back by September 20th to sell furs and pay Wade by October 1st. No room for error. Catherine nodded. If we don't try, we lose everything anyway. I'd rather fail fighting than quit without trying. Elijah leaned across the table, kissed her. You sound like a mountain woman already. 3 days of preparation, dawn to dock work. Day 1. Elijah taught Catherine the basics. How to read animal sign. Beaver tracks in mud, 5 toes, webbed feet. Fox prints, small and delicate in straight lines. Marten scat, dark and twisted, full of bone fragments. She learned fast, absorbed information like dry ground soaking rain. He showed her how to set traps without catching her own fingers. Spring tension trigger plate, how to stake the chain so a caught animal couldn't drag the trap away. Catherine practiced until her hands bled. Kept practicing. He taught her to skin. Quick cuts behind the legs around the tail, careful work around the face. She vomited the first time seeing the flesh peel away from muscle. But she learned. Day 2. Packing supplies. 40 steel traps, each one 5 pounds. 200 pounds total. Elijah would carry most of them, but Catherine insisted on taking her share. Sharps rifle and 50 rounds. Bowie knife, whetstone hatchet. Canvas tent, wool blankets, rope. Dried meat flour, salt coffee, cast iron pan pot. Everything they'd need to survive 3 weeks in the high country. Catherine sewed extra pockets into her dress for carrying small items. Made a pack from canvas and rope that fit her shoulders. Day 3. Elijah took her to the graves. 2 wooden crosses, names carved deep. His father, his sister Sarah. They stood silent. Wind moved through the aspen's leaves, rustling like whispered prayers. I'm taking her where you died, Elijah said to his father's grave. If that's wrong, I'm sorry, but I got no choice. Catherine said her own prayer. Not the rote Latin from the convent. Something simpler. Keep us safe, let us come home, that's all I ask. That night, their last before leaving, they made love with urgency, like they might not get another chance. Elijah had learned her body well in just a few days, knew the spots that made her gasp. Behind her ear, inside her wrist, the small of her back. She learned him too, the sensitive place on his inner thigh, the spot below his ribs that made him laugh. The way saying his name in his ear made him lose control. After wrapped in darkness, in each other, Catherine spoke. If we die up there, we won't. Elijah's voice was firm. But if we do, she turned to face him. I want you to know these 4 days with you that have been worth more than the 28 years before. He kissed her forehead. We're not dying, we're surviving. It's what I do best. But he held her tighter anyway. Thunder Peak rose 11,200 feet above sea level. The high valley sat in a bowl just below the summit, carved by ancient glaciers, ringed by cliffs. Getting there took 3 days of climbing. Day 1 started at dawn. The trail was narrow, steep, winding through pine forest that smelled of sap and earth. They each carried 60 pounds. Catherine's shoulders ached within an hour. At 7,000 feet, she couldn't breathe right. The air felt thin, insufficient. Each breath came shallow and fast. How much further? 4,000 feet. 2 more days. She wanted to cry. Didn't. Wouldn't give in to weakness. Elijah noticed anyway. Stopped at a clearing beside a creek. Set down his pack, and took 20 pounds from hers without asking permission. I can carry my share, she protested. I know. He redistributed the weight. But you don't have to prove anything. Save your strength for trapping. Night 1, they camped at 8,000 feet. The creek was ice cold, clear as glass. Elijah caught a trout with his bare hands, reflexes quick as a striking snake. Gutted it, cooked it over the fire. Catherine had never tasted anything so good. They slept curled together in the tent wrapped in wool and fur, made love quick and warm, both too tired for more. Slept with the Sharps rifle between them and the knife in Elijah's hand. Wolves howled in the distance. Catherine counted 7 different voices. Day 2. The climbing got harder. The trail turned to switchbacks carved into the mountainside, exposed rock, sheer drops. At 10,000 feet, they crossed an avalanche scar. Old snow compacted and dirty stretched across the slope. The trees were gone, snapped off like kindling. Elijah stopped, stared at the scar for 5 full minutes. This is where your father died, Catherine asked softly. He nodded once, didn't speak. She took his hand, held it, didn't say meaningless comfort, just stood with him. Finally, he squeezed her hand and kept climbing. At 10,500 feet, Catherine's foot slipped on loose rock. She fell sliding 10 feet down the slope before catching a scrub pine. Her palm tore open, blood streaming. Elijah climbed down, pulled her up, tore a strip from his shirt, wrapped her hand tight. You okay? She nodded through the pain, made her dizzy. They kept climbing. Night 2, camped at 10,500 feet. Above tree line now. No wood for fire. They burned dried elk dung Elijah had carried up. Supper was jerky and snow melted in the pot. Catherine shivered despite 2 blankets and Elijah's body heat. The stars overhead were impossible. Millions of them, the Milky Way so bright it cast shadows. I've never seen stars like this, Catherine whispered. You don't get this in the convent. We couldn't look up. Only down praying. What a waste. Elijah pulled her closer. Missing all this beauty. Day 3, the final climb to the pass, 11,200 feet. Catherine's lungs burned. Each breath felt like drowning in air. 2 hours to climb 500 vertical feet. 1 step, rest, another step, rest. Elijah stayed patient, never rushed her, just kept climbing slow and steady. At the top of the pass, Catherine collapsed, hands on knees gasping. Then Elijah touched her shoulder, pointed. High valley spread below them, 2 miles long, 1 mile wide. A creek ran through the middle, fed by a glacier on the eastern slope. Aspen trees blazed gold in the autumn sun. 4 beaver dams stepped down the creek like stairs. Deer tracks everywhere in the soft earth, which meant predators. Fox, marten, maybe wolf, and not a single human footprint. 8 years untouched. Last time I was here, Elijah said quietly. Dad was alive. Catherine put her arms around him from behind. Now you're here with me. New memories. They descended into the valley, set up camp by the creek. The work began. Week 1, learning and labor. Days 1 and 2, setting 40 traps across 2 miles of valley. Elijah showed Catherine where. Beaver Dam's fox runs through the grass, marten trees marked by claw scratches. She made mistakes. Set traps too shallow where foxes could see and avoid them. Elijah corrected without criticism. Just adjusted the placement. Lower. Cover with leaves. Fox is smart. Days 3 and 4. First trap, check. Results better than hoped. 6 beaver, $8 each. $48, 3 fox, $12 each. $36, 2 marten, $6 each. $12, total. $96 in 2 days. Catherine was ecstatic. We can do this if we keep this pace. Elijah stayed realistic. Animals get cautious. Numbers will drop. But he smiled anyway. Days 5 through 7, skinning and curing. Catherine learned the knife work. Quick cuts, careful peeling, stretching the hides on willow frames to dry. She ruined 2 pelts. Knife slipped, tore the hide. $16 lost. That night she cried from frustration. Elijah held her. I ruined 10 pelts my first year. You're doing better. At night they grew closer. The isolation, the shared work, the danger. All of it bound them tighter. Night 3, they were too exhausted for lovemaking. Just held each other. Night 5, they found energy. Quick and warm, both still half-dressed against the cold. Night 7, Elijah discovered a new spot, inside of Catherine's elbow. When he kissed her there, she moaned so loud the sound echoed off the peaks. Shh, he laughed against her skin. You'll start an avalanche, then start it. She pulled him closer. Week 2, skills improved. Danger increased. The trapping went better. Catherine's knife work got faster, cleaner. Fewer mistakes, more furs, 18 beaver, $144. 12 fox, $144. 9 martin, $54. Week 2 total, $342. Combined with week 1, $438. Add to what they had, $300 in old furs, $150 from Abigail. A total so far, $888. They needed $1,200, $312 short. One more week of trapping would do it, but nature had other plans. Day 10, Catherine checked traps alone while Elijah stayed at camp skinning. She found a beaver in the trap by the 4th dam, dead as expected. Then she smelled it. Musk, heavy and rank. Grizzly. She turned to run. The bear exploded from the willows. Female 7 feet tall, 800 pounds. 2 cubs behind her. A mother protecting babies. Most dangerous animal in the mountains. Catherine ran, didn't look back. Boots pounding, earth breath screaming in her lungs. The bear was faster. Grizzlies could run 30 miles an hour. Catherine couldn't match that uphill. 50 feet behind. 40. 30. She screamed. Elijah. 300 yards away at camp, Elijah heard. Grabbed the sharps. Ran, he came around the bend. Saw Catherine running. Saw the grizzly 20 feet behind her and closing. No time to think. He raised the rifle. 200 yards downhill, moving target. Impossible shot. He took it anyway. The sharps boomed like thunder. 50 caliber round, 70 grains of powder. The recoil nearly knocked him over. The bullet hit the grizzly's shoulder. Not a killing shot, but painful. The bear roared, spun toward Elijah. He was reloading. 12 seconds to reload a sharps. The bear would reach him in 8. Catherine stopped running. Turned back. She saw a rock. 20-pound size of her head. Picked it up. Threw it. Her convent years of hauling water had built strength. The rock flew true. Hit the bear's skull. The grizzly stopped. Confused. 2 threats, 2 directions. Elijah got the rifle loaded, aimed. Fired. This shot hit the heart. The bear dropped. Dead before it hit the ground. Silence except for their breathing. Fast and panicked. Elijah ran to Catherine. You came back. Why didn't you run? Because you didn't run when the bear attacked you in 72. That's different. You're my husband. I don't leave you. They held each other, both shaking, both crying from adrenaline and fear and relief. That night they made love desperately, like each moment might be the last. Elijah found that pleasure after near death was twice as intense. Week 3, continued success, growing confidence. Days 11 through 14. They worked together now, never separating, checking traps as a team. The furs kept coming. Catherine's skills matched Elijah's. Fast, clean skinning, perfect curing. By day 19, the end of week 3, $520 in new furs, total count, $958 in furs from the valley, plus $300 in old furs, plus $150 from Abigail. Grand total, $1,408, $208 more than needed. We did it. Elijah counted the pelts 3 times to be sure. Kate, we actually did it, she wept. We're going to keep our home. One more day. Tomorrow they'd pack everything, start the 3-day descent, sell the furs, pay Wade, and keep their land. Tomorrow. But tomorrow never came. Day 20, the last day. Morning broke clear and cold. They packed the furs. 958 pelts, weighing 120 pounds total. Checked the traps one final time. Found 2 more beaver, 16 more dollars. Final total, $974 in valley furs. By noon they were ready, started climbing toward the pass. The sky was blue. Perfect, no sign of trouble. Then Elijah looked west. His face went pale. Clouds, black and heavy, rolling over the peaks like spilled ink. The temperature dropped from 50 degrees to freezing in an hour. Early snow, Elijah said. We need to move. Now they climbed faster, racing the storm. The snow started as they reached 10,000 feet. Light at first, pretty even, then heavier, then a full blizzard. Wind 40 miles an hour, temperature 20 degrees, visibility 10 feet. They pushed through the pass, started down the Avalanche scar. Elijah stopped, held up his hand. Did you hear that? Catherine listened. A rumble, distant but growing. Avalanche run, they ran, but the slope was steep, covered in new snow, treacherous. Catherine's foot caught. She fell. The pack of furs tore from her back, tumbled down the slope toward a cliff edge. $974. Everything they'd worked for. Rolling away, she lunged for it, caught the pack, held on. The avalanche hit. 200 tons of snow moving 60 miles an hour. It buried everything. Elijah saw Catherine disappear under white. His heart stopped. Kate. He dug with bare hands, no shovel, just fingers clawing through snow and ice, blood streaming from torn fingernails, hands going numb from cold. 5 minutes. 6. 7. Kate. Answer me, Kate. His hand hit fabric. He dug harder, found her arm, still warm. He pulled her free. She was breathing but unconscious. Lips blue, skin ice cold. Hypothermia setting in. The furs were gone. Swept off the cliff, buried under tons of snow. Unrecoverable. Elijah had to choose. Dig for the furs and let Catherine die. Or save Catherine and lose everything. Not a choice at all. He lifted her. She was twice his size, but adrenaline made him strong. Started down the mountain in a blizzard. 3 days to get home. 3 days of hell. Day 1. Elijah carried Catherine 12 hours straight. She drifted in and out of consciousness, mumbled about the furs, about failing, about losing their home. He told her she hadn't failed, told her she was alive, told her that was enough. Day 2, she woke enough to walk, but the pneumonia was starting. Rattling cough, fever building. Day 3, they reached the cabin. Catherine collapsed, fever 104 degrees. Elijah laid her in bed, covered her with every blanket they owned, tried to break the fever with cold cloths. She was unconscious for 2 days. On the second day, Elijah did something he hadn't done in 8 years. He prayed, not to his own God, the distant, silent God of mountains and survival, but to hers, the Catholic God she'd served for 10 years. He took her rosary from her bag, held the wooden beads in his scarred hands, tried to remember the words he'd heard her whisper. Hail Mary, full of grace. The words came broken, unpracticed. The Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women. He didn't know the rest, made up his own prayer. Instead, I don't know if you're listening. Don't know if you care about a man like me. But she's yours, was yours for 10 years, gave up everything to serve you. His voice cracked. If you're real, if you're good, don't take her. Please, I'll do anything, believe anything. Just don't take her. He prayed until his voice gave out. Prayed until the words were just breath in hope. On the third day, Catherine's fever broke. She opened her eyes, saw Elijah beside the bed, rosary in hand, lips moving in prayer. You're praying, she whispered. He looked up, saw her awake, alive. He crushed her to his chest, sobbed into her hair. I thought I lost you, just like I lost Dad in those same mountains. You didn't lose me. Her arms came around him, weak but there. I'm still here. They held each other while outside Wyoming wind howled and snow fell. November 1915. Present day. The fire had burned low again. Elijah sat silent, remembering. Thomas waited, understanding that some memories needed silence before words. Finally, the old man spoke. Your grandmother wrote in her journal that day, after the fever broke. He opened to a page, read aloud. September 25th, 1876. I woke to find Elijah praying. First time I've seen him pray in 3 weeks. He was praying to my God, the Catholic God he doesn't believe in, begging for my life. That's when I knew he loved me more than land, more than home, more than anything. Thomas leaned forward. So you lost the furs and almost lost Grandma. What did you do? Elijah closed the journal. We fought. With nothing left but each other and $450, that wasn't enough. 3 days until Wade Hutchins would take our land. How did you survive that? Elijah smiled. sad and proud at once. Your grandmother stood up in front of the whole town and shamed them into being human. But that's a story for part 3. He fed the fire, watched the flames catch, because the hardest part wasn't surviving the mountain. It was surviving what came after. The fire crackled between grandfather and grandson. Outside, the November snow continued its silent fall, burying the world in white. Elijah Stone, 66, and worn by time, held Catherine's journal like it might break. Thomas sat forward, young face intent. 3 days until you had to pay. No furs. Grandma sick. What could you possibly do? Elijah's mouth twisted, something between smile and grimace. Your grandmother had an idea. Crazy idea. Brave idea. He paused. The kind of idea only a woman who'd survived 10 years of beatings could come up with. What idea? Make them watch us lose. Make the whole town see Wade Hutchins for what he was. A thief in a suit? Thomas frowned. How would that help? Elijah opened the journal. Found a page. Catherine's handwriting shaky but determined. September 28th, 1876. Elijah wants to run. Head to Montana and start over. But I didn't leave the convent to run. I left to stand. Tomorrow we stand together even if we fall. The old man looked up. She was half dead from pneumonia, could barely walk, but she refused to quit. September 29th. 2 days before the deadline, Catherine sat up in bed for the first time in 3 days. The fever had broken, but the weakness remained. Her body felt hollow, scraped clean. Elijah brought her soup, thin broth from a rabbit he'd snared. She sipped it slow, each swallow an effort. We should pack, he said quietly. Leave tomorrow morning before Wade comes for the land. Number. Her voice was raw from coughing, but firm. Kate, we got $450. That's $750 short. There's no way to make that in 2 days. Then we give him what we have and make him refuse it in front of everyone. Elijah stared at her. What good does that do? She set down the soup bowl, looked at him with those green eyes that had first caught him 3 weeks ago at the train station. Wade wants the land because of the railroad, but he also wants respect. Needs it to do business with the railroad company. If the whole town sees him refuse a sick woman's last money, sees him throw us off our land over $700, his reputation dies. And if he takes it anyway, then we tried, we fought, we leave with dignity instead of running like thieves in the night. Elijah sat on the bed edge, took her hand in his. You almost died 3 days ago. You should be resting, healing. Not planning to fight Wade Hutchins in the town square. Catherine squeezed his fingers. I spent 10 years resting, kneeling, being quiet and small and obedient. She coughed, the sound wet and rattling. I'm done with that. If we lose tomorrow, at least we lose standing up. He looked at her, this woman who'd left everything for love, who'd climbed mountains and faced bears and survived avalanches, who refused to be broken. All right, his voice went hard. We fight, October 1st, 1876, the day of judgment. They rode into Lander at noon. The whole town had gathered in the square. Word had spread. The hermit and the nun were making their stand. 150 people crowded the dirt street, men in work clothes and Sunday suits, women in bonnets and shawls, children running between legs sensing drama. A wooden platform had been erected in front of the general store. Wade Hutchins stood on it, black suit, spotless, gold watch chain, gleaming in the autumn sun. Sheriff Tom Bradley stood beside him, badge-catching light, face neutral but uncomfortable. Billy Hutchins and 3 friends lounged nearby, grinning like wolves. Elijah helped Catherine down from the mule. She could barely stand. Pneumonia had stolen 20 pounds she couldn't afford to lose. But she stood straight, chin up, refusing to show weakness. The crowd parted as they walked toward the platform. Whispers followed. Look at her half dead. Poor things. Wade's going too far this time. Wade's voice boomed across the square. Mr. Stone, do you have my $1,200? Elijah climbed onto the platform. Catherine stayed below, leaning against a post for support. No, sir. We have $450. He set a leather pouch on the makeshift table. Coins clinked inside. Wade opened it, counted slowly, making a show of it. $450. You're $750 short. His voice carried satisfaction. Not acceptable. Elijah kept his face blank, but his hands clenched. We spent 3 weeks in the mountains trapping. Got $974 in furs. Early snow hit. Avalanche buried everything. My wife nearly died. He pointed down at Catherine. She swayed slightly, gripping the post. This 450 is everything we have left in the world. The crowd murmured. Sympathy building. Some people had seen them ride up the mountain 3 weeks ago. Seen them come back half frozen, Catherine barely alive. Wade shrugged unmoved. I'm sorry for your troubles, but law is law. You can't pay you, forfeit the land. Catherine moved then, pushed off from the post, climbed the platform steps. Each step visible effort. But she made it, stood before Wade, still taller than him despite the sickness, still strong despite the weakness. Mr. Hutchins were asking for mercy. Not mercy, Mrs. Stone. Business. Then let me make you a business proposition. She turned to face the crowd, raised her voice so everyone could hear. This man wants our land because the railroad's coming through next year. He's been buying property along the route. Our land is the last piece he needs. When he gets it, he'll sell to the railroad for $5,000. Wade's face reddened. That's speculation. Is it? Catherine gestured to the crowd. Abigail Mercer stepped forward holding a rolled map. Mrs. Mercer has her late husband's survey maps. They show the planned route going right through Stoneland. The railroad filed it with the territorial office last month. Public record. Abigail unrolled the map, held it up. The route was marked clear as day, cutting straight through the Wind River proper. The crowd's murmur grew louder. Understanding spreading like fire. Catherine continued, voice gaining strength. So Mr. Hutchins stands to make $3,800 profit from taking land from a man who's lived there 8 years. A man whose father is buried there, whose mother and sister died there. She paused, let it sink in. Is that the kind of businessman Lander wants representing us to the railroad? Wade's face went from red to purple. I'm not stealing, I filed legally. After your husband failed to file properly. You filed after waiting 8 years for him to be vulnerable. Catherine's voice cut like a blade. After he got married, after you knew he'd need money. She turned back to the crowd. We're offering everything we have, $450. If that's not enough for Mr. Hutchins, fine. But when the railroad comes, when they ask who sold them this land, remember this day. Remember he chose $750 over mercy, over decency, over doing what's right. Silence fell, heavy as snow. Wade saw the crowd, saw faces turning against him. Calculation flickered in his eyes. He needed these people, needed their respect to do business. If the whole town thought him a cheat, the railroad deal would be harder. Other deals would dry up. But he couldn't back down completely. Not without losing face. I'll accept $450 as down payment. His voice was tight. You have 6 months to pay the remaining $750. Interest 10% per year. Elijah stepped forward. We can't make $750 in 6 months. Even trapping all winter. Wade shrugged. Then you'll lose the land in April instead of today. But at least I'll look reasonable. Some in the crowd nodded. Seemed fair on the surface. But Catherine saw the trap. Winter trapping, I'd bring $300 if they were lucky. Still $450 short come April. Wade would get the land anyway, just delayed. She opened her mouth to argue. A voice cut through the square. I'll loan them $200. Abigail Mercer stepped onto the platform, opened her handbag, pulled out a thick envelope. No interest, 10-year repayment. Elijah started to protest. Mrs. Mercer, you already gave us $150. Quiet, boy. Abigail's voice was steel wrapped in kindness. I'm not done. She turned to the crowd. My husband and I were outcasts here for 30 years. Mexican wife, Irish husband, neither one welcome. But we survived, built a life. When he died, he left me enough to help others. She looked directly at Wade. I won't let a greedy man destroy a marriage that's braver than any I've seen in this town. Another voice rose. Big Jim Murphy, the Irish blacksmith who'd spit tobacco at Catherine 2 weeks ago. I'll loan $100. His face was red with shame. My wife's Catholic too. I was wrong to judge. He stepped forward, laid coins on the table. Mr. Carson, the general store owner, came next. $50 from me. Miss Sarah Thornton, the school teacher, unmarried, in 20 years teaching children. $75 from my savings. One by one they came. Ranchers, shopkeepers, workers. Some gave $20, some gave $10. Some gave 5. The pile grew, and in 15 minutes the crowd had gathered $650. Added to Elijah's 450, 1,100 total, 100 short. Wade smiled, still short. Nice try, but the law says 1,200. Deputy Frank Garrett, who'd come with Wade that first morning, stepped forward. He unpinned his badge, dropped it in the dirt. I'll cover the last 100. His voice was quiet but clear. I quit Wade. This whole thing's dirty and I won't be part of it. He laid 5 gold double eagles on the table. Total, $1,200. Exact. Sheriff Bradley stepped forward, counted the money, verified it. Mr. Hutchins, they have full payment. Do you accept? Wade stood trapped, every eye on him. If he refused now after the town had rallied, his reputation would be destroyed forever. His jaw worked, face twitching, finally through gritted teeth. I accept. Sheriff Bradley pulled out the deed transfer papers, made Wade sign, made Elijah sign. The land legally transferred to Elijah Stone and Catherine Stone. Their home, saved. The crowd erupted, cheering, clapping. Not everyone. Some faces showed disgust, but enough celebrated to matter. Catherine's knees buckled. Elijah caught her, held her up. She turned to the crowd, to the people who'd saved them. Thank you. Her voice broke. All of you, thank you. Abigail climbed the platform, hugged Catherine despite the height difference. You fought. That's what mattered. The rest of us just followed your lead. Elijah pulled Catherine onto the platform with him, in front of everyone. She was weak, swaying, but she stood. He looked at the crowd, at faces that had whispered and judged and mocked them for 3 weeks. His voice carried across the square. I got something to say. The crowd quieted. Most of you know me as the hermit, the mountain man who don't talk to people. That's fair. I haven't been social. He looked at Catherine. But this woman changed that. She's former Sister Catherine from Holy Names Convent in Denver. She left her vows to marry me, broke her promises to God because she wanted to live, really live. His voice grew stronger. This town's been talking, calling her fallen nun, calling me fool who married a woman too big, calling us unnatural. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. They had said these things. We're still saying them, but here's what I know. This woman climbed 11,000 feet, learned to trap in 3 weeks, faced a grizzly bear that would have killed most men, nearly died in an avalanche trying to save our future. He took both her hands in his, and when we lost everything, she stood up here, sick as death, and fought for our home. He turned to face her fully. Catherine Brennan Stone, you're the strongest, bravest, most beautiful woman I've ever known, and I don't give a damn what anyone thinks about us. Then in front of 150 people, he kissed her, had to reach up as she was taller. She bent down, met him halfway. The kiss was deep, claiming desperate. 30 years of loneliness ending. 10 years of hiding ending. Everything they were and could be poured into that moment. When they broke apart, Catherine was crying. Elijah was crying. Half the crowd was crying. Abigail Mercer started clapping. Others joined. Not everyone. Maybe half. But half was enough. Then Reverend Josiah Crane stepped forward. Baptist minister, 50 years old, righteous as winter. This is blasphemy. A nun who broke sacred vows, living in sin. Catherine wiped her eyes, turned to face him. We are married, Reverend. Justice of the peace, legal and binding. But not in the eyes of God. You swore vows to Christ. She stepped down from the platform. Walked to him on unsteady legs. Stood before him still taller, despite her weakness. I swore vows when I was 18. Forced by a family that saw me as burden. I prayed for 10 years. God was silent. Her voice didn't waver. But when I left, when I chose love, I heard him clearly for the first time. This is what I made you for. Not to hide your strength, not to make yourself small, but to be full, complete, alive. She met the Reverend's eyes. If loving my husband is sin, I'll answer for it when I meet God. But I don't think it is. I think he made me big and strong to survive these mountains, made me brave to leave safety for love, brought me to Elijah because we were meant to save each other. The Reverend had no answer, opened his mouth closed, it turned away. Some in the crowd looked convinced, others still skeptical, but no one could deny her conviction. Catherine swayed. Elijah caught her before she fell. Let's go home, he said softly. Yes, she leaned on him. Let's go home. They spent the next 6 months paying back debts. October 1876. Elijah trapped dawn to dusk. Catherine recovered from pneumonia, helped skin and cure. They made $240, paid Abigail $50, paid Big Jim $30, paid Mr. Carson $10. November. Catherine started teaching children to read. 3 days a week, $2 per child per month. 8 children signed up. $16 monthly income. December. Christmas came. They hosted a small dinner for those who had helped. Abigail Big Jim and his wife, Margaret Mr. Carson, Miss Sarah former Deputy Frank. Catherine cooked Irish stew from her childhood. Everyone said it was the best meal they'd had all year, January through March 1877. Winter trapping brought $680 total. By March 15th, they'd paid every penny. The land was theirs, truly, completely no debts hanging over it. April 1877, 8 months after their first night together. Catherine woke feeling strange, nauseous, tired despite sleeping 10 hours. Her breasts ached. She'd missed her monthly bleeding. Twice now. In the convent, she'd stopped bleeding after 5 years of near starvation, thought herself barren. But now with regular food and happiness, her body had healed. She rode to Lander, found Dr. Helen Matthews, the only physician in town, a woman rare for the profession, 45 years old, sharp-eyed, competent. Dr. Matthews examined her, smiled. "Congratulations, Mrs. Stone. You're about 10 weeks along." Catherine sat stunned. A baby due in October. The doctor washed her hands. "You're healthy. Should be a normal pregnancy." Catherine rode home in a daze, found Elijah chopping wood behind the cabin. She watched him work, shirtless despite the spring chill, scars on display, muscles moving under skin. This man who'd learned to love her, who'd chosen her over everything. Elijah. He turned, saw her face. Set down the axe. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." She walked to him. "Everything's right." Took his hand, placed it on her belly. "We're having a baby." He froze, completely still, eyes wide. "A what?" "A baby. Our baby. Due in October." He dropped to his knees, put both arms around her waist, pressed his face to her stomach. She felt him crying, felt the wetness soaking through her dress. "We're going to be parents, yes. I don't know how to be a father." She laughed, carding fingers through his hair. "You didn't know how to be a husband either, but you learned." October 15th, 1877, exactly 1 year after they'd saved the land from Wade Hutchins. Catherine's labor started at dawn, lasted 14 hours. Dr. Helen Matthews came to the cabin. Abigail Mercer assisted. Elijah stayed through all of it, holding Catherine's hand, wiping her forehead, whispering encouragement. Men didn't usually stay for births, but Elijah refused to leave. At 8 in the evening, the baby came. A girl, 9 pounds healthy, screaming with strong lungs, red hair like her mother, gray eyes like her father. They named her Margaret, Maggie for short, after Big Jim's wife who'd been kind when others weren't. Elijah held his daughter for the first time, hands trembling. "She's so small." Catherine laughed, exhausted. "She's 9 pounds. That's big. Not compared to you." He kissed Catherine's forehead. "Thank you." That night, the 3 of them slept together. Maggie between her parents. Safe. Loved. Home. November 1877. Maggie was 1 month old. Catherine wanted her baptized Catholic, but there was no Catholic church in Lander, only Baptist and Methodist. Father Patrick O'Brien was a circuit priest, traveled through Wyoming territory every 3 months, saying Mass for scattered Catholics. Catherine wrote to him, asked him to baptize Maggie. He arrived in early November. 55 years old, Irish accent, thick as wool, kind eyes but stern face. She met him at the makeshift chapel, really just a room above the general store. "Father, thank you for coming." He studied her. "You're the former Sister Catherine, the one who left holy names." "Yes, Father." He shook his head. "You're excommunicated, left your vows, married outside the church. I know. But my daughter is innocent. She deserves God's blessing." Father O'Brien frowned. "The child was conceived outside sacramental marriage. We are married, justice of the peace, not recognized by the church." He crossed his arms. "I cannot baptize a child born of sin." Abigail Mercer, who'd come along for support, stepped forward. "Father, this woman nearly died saving her family. She's taught 16 children to read for free. She's lived more Christian life in 1 year than most lifelong churchgoers. She faced the priest directly. If God doesn't accept her, then maybe your God is too small. Father O'Brien's eyes widened. Then slowly he laughed. You're right, Mrs. Mercer. Absolutely right. He turned to Catherine. Who am I to deny God's grace? He agreed to baptize Margaret. 20 people attended, Catholics, Protestants, non-believers, mixed together. Abigail stood as godmother, Big Jim Murphy as godfather. First time Lander had seen a mixed faith ceremony. Afterward, Father O'Brien spoke privately with Catherine. This doesn't mean you're forgiven by the church. That would require confession, penance, annulment of your marriage. Catherine met his eyes steadily. I understand, and I'm not asking forgiveness. I'm asking for my daughter to be welcomed into faith. As for me, God and I have made our peace. The priest studied her, nodded slowly. I believe you have. The years passed. Life built itself day by day. 1878. Maggie learned to walk at 10 months. Fast, determined, stubborn. Elijah built an addition to the cabin. 2 more rooms. Catherine's school grew to 20 children. The town started paying her $30 a month. 1879. A son was born. Thomas, named after Reverend Thomas Crane, the Baptist minister who'd objected at the town square, but had slowly, grudgingly come to accept them. The Reverend cried when he learned the baby's name. 1880. The railroad arrived, just as Abigail's maps had predicted. Wade Hutchins made his fortune selling other land to the railroad company. But not the stone land, never the stone land. Wade approached Elijah one day in town. I'll buy your property for $5,000. Elijah looked at him. At this man who tried to steal their home. It's not for sale. This is where my family lives, where my parents are buried, where my children will grow up. Wade's face twisted. You're a fool, Stone. That land's worth a fortune. Maybe, but some things matter more than money. Elijah walked away, never looked back. 1881. A daughter was born. Catherine called little Kate. 8 pounds quieter than her siblings, watchful eyes that missed nothing. 1882. Another son, Elijah Jr., 7 pounds loud, demanding, always hungry. 4 children now, ages 5, 3, 2, and newborn. The cabin rang with noise, crying and laughing and shouting. The sounds of life, 1889. 13 years after the wedding, Catherine was 41, Elijah 40. Their children were 12, 10, 8, and 7. They sat on the porch one evening watching the kids play. Maggie was teaching Thomas to read. Little Kate and Eli Jr. were climbing aspens, seeing who could get higher. Catherine wrote in her journal as she did every night. August 20th, 1889. I left the convent 13 years ago today. Sometimes I think about the life I abandoned, the quiet, the safety, the simplicity. Then I look at my husband, my children, my home, and I know I wouldn't trade this for anything. Elijah read over her shoulder. You ever regret it leaving? She thought about it. Honest, I regret the 10 years I wasted hiding, but leaving never. Not even when we almost died in the mountains, especially not then, because that's when I learned you'd choose me over everything. He kissed her head, every time, every single time. They sat in comfortable silence, hands linked, watching their children grow in the golden light. Then Maggie screamed. Mappa Thomas fell from the tree. He's hurt. They both jumped up. Ran to where Thomas lay on the ground, arm bent wrong, crying. Dr. Matthews was summoned. The arm was broken but would heal. Life continued. Never easy. Always challenging. But together. April 3rd, 1915. Catherine woke knowing she was dying. Had known for months but kept it from Elijah. The consumption, same disease that had killed Mother Superior Agatha. Fitting somehow. She was 66, had lived 40 years with Elijah, seen her children grow and marry, held 12 grandchildren, built a life beyond anything she'd dreamed in that convent cell. She wrote her final journal entry. Elijah thinks I don't know I'm dying, but I know, consumption like Mother Agatha. Perhaps this is God's way of reminding me where I came from. But I'm not afraid. I had 40 years of more happiness than I thought possible. I had a husband who learned every spot on my body that made me tremble and never stopped learning. I had children, grandchildren, a community that grew from judgment to acceptance to love. I had a life. To any woman reading this who feels too big, too much, too loud for the world, you're not. You're exactly right. Find someone who sees that and then tremble together. She died 3 days later, Elijah holding her hand, her children surrounding the bed, grandchildren waiting outside. Her last words whispered so soft only Elijah heard. Every night, you learned me every night. He kissed her forehead, and you taught me what it meant to live. She smiled, closed her eyes, didn't open them again. Elijah buried her next to his parents, next to his sister Sarah, in the ground she'd fought to keep, the ground that had become home. November 1915. The fire had burned to coals. Thomas sat silent, processing everything. Elijah closed the journal, set it gently on the table. So that's the story. A virgin mountain man and a runaway nun, 40 years of marriage, 4 children, 12 grandchildren, and more love than I knew existed in the world. Thomas wiped his eyes. And you never regretted it, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. Elijah looked at his grandson. The hard times proved it was real, proved it was worth fighting for. Thomas pulled out a photograph. A young woman, dark hair, bright eyes. This is Marie, French, Catholic, from Lyon. My family says I'm betraying our faith, throwing away my future. He looked up. But Grandpa, when I'm with her, I feel like I've found home. Elijah studied the photograph. Marie was tall for a woman, strong-looking. She looks like she could survive mountains. Thomas laughed. She's a farmer's daughter, stronger than most men I know. Elijah leaned forward. Then marry her boy. Before you ship out to France, if you wait until after the war, you might not come back. Or she might not wait. But the family. Elijah's voice went hard. Damn the family. Listen to me, Thomas. Your grandmother left everything for love. We nearly died for it. Lost our money, our safety, our reputation. He picked up the journal. But we gained 40 years of waking up next to our best friend. That's worth more than any approval, any inheritance, any proper marriage. What if we don't make it? The war, the distance, the culture. Then you'll have tried, you'll have fought for love. Elijah's eyes were fierce. Better to fight and lose than never fight at all. He handed Thomas the journal. Take this to France. Read it when you doubt. And when you find Marie, tell her I said be brave. Tremble together. Thomas hugged his grandfather, long and tight. Thank you, Grandpa. Dawn came. Thomas packed his bag. The journal went in first, wrapped careful in oilcloth. He stood on the porch looking at the mountains. Same mountains his grandparents had fought to keep. Same cabin they'd built their life in. Elijah stood beside him, wrapped in a wool coat against the cold. You'll write every week, and you'll marry her the day I get to France. Good. Elijah gripped his shoulder. Make your own life, boy. Don't let anyone tell you how to love. Thomas climbed onto his horse. Turn back once. Grandpa, what was the spot that made Grandma tremble most? Elijah smiled, sad and distant. Wasn't physical. It was when I looked at her and saw not the runaway nun, not the giant woman, not the burden, but saw her, Catherine, strong and scared and alive. He touched his chest. That look trembled her then. Trembles me still, even though she's gone. Thomas nodded, rode away toward the train station, toward France, toward Marie, toward his own future. Elijah watched until his grandson disappeared, then turned back to the cabin. Alone now, truly alone for the first time in 40 years. He went inside, sat by the cold fireplace, picked up Catherine's rosary from the bedside table, the wooden beads she'd carried from the convent, started to pray. The words came easier now after 40 years of hearing her whisper them. Hail Mary, full of grace. His voice cracked but continued. The Lord is with thee. He prayed until the sun rose full, prayed until he felt her presence, not gone but transformed, not lost but changed. Then he stood, fed the fire, made coffee, started another day. Because Catherine had taught him that living meant continuing, meant finding purpose even in grief, meant honoring the past by building the future. He walked outside, looked at the mountains painted gold by sunrise, whispered to the wind, every night, Kate, I learned you every night, and you taught me every day what it meant to be fully alive. The wind answered, moving through the aspens, through the pines, carrying her voice or maybe just memory, Then tremble, my love, keep trembling, because that means you're still living. Elijah smiled, touched his wedding ring, silver worn thin by 40 years of wear, and walked back into the cabin to start the day. Because life continued, love continued, the mountains continued, and somewhere in France his grandson would read the journal, would find his own courage, would build his own life with a woman worth fighting for. The legacy passed down from generation to generation, not in land or money or name, but in the simple, terrifying, beautiful act of choosing love over safety, of choosing to tremble together rather than stand alone. That was the inheritance. That was the story. That was everything that mattered. In France, 6 months later, Thomas Stone married Marie Dubois in a small Catholic church outside Lyon. He wore his army uniform. She wore her mother's wedding dress. Father O'Brien's nephew, also a priest, performed the ceremony. The same family blessing that had baptized Maggie 40 years before. Thomas carried his grandmother's journal in his pack through the trenches of the Great War. Read it by candlelight in muddy foxholes. Drew strength from words written by a woman who'd climbed mountains and survived avalanches and loved without shame. He survived the war, brought Marie to America, to Wyoming, to the cabin where his grandfather still lived. Elijah met Marie at the door, looked up at this tall French woman who towered over his grandson, smiled, "Welcome home," and the cycle continued. Love finding love, courage finding courage. The trembling passed down through generations like a promise kept. In the high country of Wyoming, the mountains stood eternal. Snow fell and melted, seasons turned, years passed, but in a cabin by a creek surrounded by aspens and pines, the story lived on, the story of a virgin mountain man and a runaway nun who chose love over everything else, who learned each other in the darkness and claimed each other in the light, who trembled together for 40 years and taught the world what it meant to be truly magnificently, courageously alive. Their graves stood side by side on the hill, simple wooden crosses, names carved deep. Elijah Stone, 1849 to 1921. Catherine Brennan Stone, 1848 to 1915. Together, always together. And on quiet nights when the wind moved just right through the valley, you could almost hear them, laughing, loving, living, trembling together in the darkness and the light, forever.